Welcome everyone to the Sci-Fi Queens podcast, where we celebrate all things sci-fi, especially the women in science fiction, female scientists, upcoming scientists, and sci-fi books and their authors. If you are new here, we ask that you click that subscribe and notification bell to let you know when our episodes are up. I am your host, Nita. And tonight, joining me is a very VIP guest and sci fi author, James Gamwell. Please tell me I said your name correctly.
Chase.
Chase,
Yeah.
Chase Gamwell. Chase Gamwell. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you having me on, and I want to start by saying that intro was fantastic. I really enjoyed watching that, so that worth the price of admission for sure.
Well, thank you for that. Guys, normally on the bottom of the screen, you will see the sci-fi-queens.net um, website scrolling, but tonight we have a whole different link there. Okay, Chase Gamwell is created this amazing link on his website, and we're going to talk about what that is. And if you're a sci-fi indie author, you might want to listen in on this one for sure. But before we start on that website and that link, talk to us about who you are. Tell me what's going on.
Yeah. So my name is Chase Gamwell. I'm a science fiction author. Right now, I'm writing YA sci-fi. My debut novel is called Ico's Dive. It's YA sci-fi. I'm writing that right now. I'm going to be writing other stuff in the future. But yeah, sci-fi author. By night, by day, I work in the STEM field. Yeah, I've worked in a variety of STEM fields throughout my career. So, I guess going through kind of my normal bio is I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama. My dad's worked for NASA for 30 years, so I spent a lot of
Wow,
time growing up around the space program. So
that's
I got to
beautiful.
visit
I
him at
love
work.
it.
Yeah. I got to visit him at work. I got to see kind of behind the scenes. I spent a lot of time at the Space and Rocket Center because the Space and Rocket Center's in Huntsville. That's where they filmed the Space Camp movie, if anybody remembers that movie from way back in the day.
Yes,
Uh, so
yes,
they filmed that
absolutely.
there. So yeah, I grew up around the space program. I grew up around science, and I really that got me into science fiction at a young age, and then I eventually kind of accidentally fell into writing in about 2013. I was kind of, hey, I guess I'll try writing. Found out I liked it a lot, so I've stuck with it since then.
That's wonderful. And how many books have you written so far? Do you have a count yet, or like, are you
So
not counting?
that's an interesting question because I write about a book a year. So since
Wow.
I started writing, I've written 10 at least. I've thrown away like eight of those. I haven't thrown away. Yeah, I there's a lot of them that I put on the back burner where they were okay, they weren't great. I wasn't a mature enough writer. I mean, a lot of people will say you need to write like 5 books. It takes 5 books for you to really find your voice and really get your feet under you as a writer. And funnily enough, my book that got published is my sixth novel. So that is my sixth novel. I've written 4 since then. Well, 5 since then if you include the sequel. So yeah, one of them is the sequel that's in the process of being published now, and then one of them is book one of a trilogy that I'm actually going to be publishing next after the sequel comes out.
Guys, you got to go check out his books. They're on my to be read list. I mean, Fako Chase, he is awesome. And we're going to talk about this community you're building, this link. First of all, what inspired tell us a little bit about what is it that you've done with this website? What's the purpose of it? And let's go from there with that.
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and I thought about this for a really long time before actually doing it, and for the longest time I thought it was a dumb idea, um, and really for me, I really enjoy science fiction a lot, and I know a lot of people enjoy science fiction, but the problem with science fiction is that it is as for as many people as enjoy it, it is a very niche genre. Out of all the readers, and it's funny because I saw a TikTok video that was talking about out of all of the readers, only 12% of those readers are science fiction readers. And the issue with sci-fi is a lot of people are very intimidated by it. So it's not that they
Yeah,
wouldn't
it is.
necessarily read sci-fi, it's that they don't feel confident actually going into the genre because they don't know where to start, they don't know how to read sci-fi. So for me personally, I've always wanted to be one of those writers who can write sci-fi that anybody can read. But at the same time, I understand that I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea. No matter how much I'd like to cater to everybody or write sci-fi that anybody can read, that's just not going to be the case. So, on TikTok, fantasy and romance are king, which makes
Yeah,
sense.
they are, and they're very popular. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with those genres at all.
No.
Yeah, I'm
No.
with you on that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably going to write. I can't say that I'm never going to write fantasy in the future or that I'm never going to write sci-fi romance. I mean, I have an idea for a sci-fi romance that I'm going to write in the future, but when you look at the follower counts for romance and fantasy, they're huge compared to the sci-fi counts where someone might have only a few thousand, followers. And the problem with that is that TikTok really does cater and algorithms really do cater to how many followers you have and how many people engage with your
Yes.
content. And so I thought about, well, it's really easy to find aggregate lists of fantasy or romance. People are making those lists all the time. Even now for indie authors, because indie fantasy is really big on TikTok. But there's none of that for sci-fi. No one's really interested.
Yeah.
So I said, well, for like I said, for the longest time I thought about it and I was like, well, people might think it's stupid or people might think I'm trying to do it for the wrong reasons or people might criticize the list or and then I saw that video that talked about readers are only 12% of the audience. And I decided to pull the trigger. I said, you know what? I'll go ahead and see how many people would be interested in being on a list like that. And that's,
Yeah.
that video. I got to find out who made that video again. I can't remember. But that video was what really kind of pushed me over the edge. And I said, okay, I have to do this because it would be great to have a list of all these sci fi authors because there isn't
Yeah.
one right now.
No, there really isn't. And as someone who reads sci-fi books often in order to review them, it is really challenging to find a particular book or particular type of author or theme in sci-fi which you know exists, but you Google things and it's not giving you those indie authors that you want. Or even just traditionally published authors as well, and that can be a little bit challenging. And I this list I looked at and go, oh my god, this list is gonna I'm going broke because there's so many books here I want to read. I love it. I love the list absolutely. Now, why do you think it's only a 12% readership in sci-fi books?
Well, it's that's actually a great question, and I my answer is going to be so. I recently went to an event, a live event, and you know there were maybe 40, 50 tables there. There were only I think three sci-fi tables there. One of the sci-fi tables was someone who started with sci-fi, but their true love was fantasy. They're still on the list because they wrote sci-fi, but they're on the list. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but it was me, and then the other sci-fi writer happened
Yeah.
to set up table right next to me. And so every person who walked by, they'd kind of glance at my table, and it's easy to just not ask the question. But I was like, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And you engage them, and then the first question I always led with is, "Do you guys like to read sci-fi?" And most people were like, "No, I don't like reading sci-fi at all." And I would say, "Well, I mean, what kind of stuff do you like to read?" And a lot of people, instead of just saying, oh, romance or oh, fantasy, they'll say, well, I kind of like to read, psychological type stuff, or I kind of like to read this. And they would name tropes that they like to read. And I was like, well, my book
Exactly.
has X, Y, and Z. It's
Mhm.
science fiction, and I write it to be really accessible to people who don't necessarily read sci fi. So would you be interested? And, you'd be surprised at how many people were like, oh, that's really interesting. And
Yeah.
even though they wouldn't necessarily buy the book, that's not the point. I would give them a card. I have little business cards that I made up, with my name and a QR code
Yes.
to my link tree. So I would say, listen, there's a list of indie sci-fi authors on my website, and if you are interested in, science fiction, and my book doesn't necessarily sound like something that you would want to read, you can take my card, go to my website, and browse through, because I guarantee you there's something on there that you would want to read. And
Yeah.
I've handed out half a dozen cards, more than that, probably 10 cards plus, of people going, yeah, sure, I'll take this.
Yeah.
And when I look at the metrics on the website, I mean, people are going to the site. People are
Yeah.
definitely, they're definitely going and viewing the indie sci-fi author page. I mean, over the past few weeks, it's been 5 to 10 views per day on the list, which I think is pretty good, considering that I'm just kind of
Fantastic.
a no-name author, that just started putting the list together a few weeks ago.
Well, I think also one of the things that stops people from engaging with science fiction books or even watching science fiction movies and TV shows is the misunderstanding of what science fiction is.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all of the romance,
Mm-hmm.
all of the psychological thrillers, the action. You can have
Yeah.
all of those things and still be science fiction. And you could even have military sci-fi. It's all there for the taking, and I think that that's something that people tend to misunderstand.
Mm-hmm.
We have some comments, and I want to put them up. Mel's Rebellion, sci-fi author, she's awesome. How you doing, girl? Now, Sarah is one of our sci-fi queens. She's on a break. I sound like Ross and Rachel every time I say that. But she's here joining us. Hi, James. Hi, how you doing? He is a sci-fi author as well. And I just wanted to acknowledge them for being here. But yes, now if an indie sci-fi author wanted to be on your list, uh, what do they do? What should they which they go? What's the process?
So at first, so when I was putting the list together, the process was either comment on my video or send me a DM. I've kind of moved past that a little bit, because I've started getting requests, and I'd gotten so many requests at the end. It was very difficult to juggle, because I was getting requests on Instagram, I was getting requests on TikTok, I was getting some requests on Twitter when I started filling out there. So what I've done is, at the very bottom of the list, I've actually put a form that any indie sci-fi author that wants to be added to the list can actually fill out. All they have to do is there's a drop down menu that says new author or list correction. They just select new author, and then all they have to put in is their name, their website if they have one, a link to the book if they have one. Just because that's all I'm doing, is I'm doing a book, the website, and then a little bit about them. So they just fill those 3 things out. It will send me an email that is specifically labeled Indie Sci-Fi Authors list, so I know it's supposed to go
Excellent.
directly for that list. And I know that if it isn't opened, it hasn't been added to the spreadsheet, because
And
I'm adding.
how many authors do you have so far on this
I
list?
think we're at 85 right now. I think we're up to 85
What?
authors on the list. Yeah. And I'm
Wow.
waiting on a few additional. Let me see. I opened the list right now, so 88. Yeah, so we're at 85, and I'm waiting on a few people to actually submit through the website to be able to add those. So yeah,
That's
85 authors.
fantastic. And the diversity, guys, of the list is amazing. The diversity is amazing. Men, women, Latinos, African Americans. There's just everyone is on this list.
Hmm.
Um, it's amazing.
And even genre wise, and that's something I do want to say, is there's a lot of people I reached out to, because I am reaching out to people as well as I come across them. I'm not just expecting everyone to reach out to me.
Hmm.
And I've reached out to a lot of people, and they go, well, my book isn't really like, it's like fantasy and stuff like that. And there's a few people that, like, there's a book on the list that it's subtitled like urban fantasy, right? But when you read in, it's like it's urban fantasy because it has werewolves. But then when you read the
Oh.
synopsis, the werewolves were created by a virus and it takes place in a post apocalyptic world. So for me, even though the author says, well, that's urban fantasy, I'm like, yeah, but also it has sci fi elements. So I'm being
Hmm.
extremely like lax about what I put on the list
Yeah.
because it's not
But I
about.
would consider post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
stories sci-fi as well.
Exactly, and I'm not, and that's the point. Is I'm not trying to gatekeep what sci-fi is. That's not my job. My job is to just
Mm-hmm.
say, does it have any sci-fi elements in it? And if it has any sci-fi elements in it, or
Yeah.
any elements that I consider to be sci-fi in it, which I'm pretty broad about that, I'm adding it to the list. So as you go through the list, you might see books that you're like, this feels like it's more fantasy. Maybe, but it does actually have a significant science fiction element in it. And sometimes that crossover is what a reader might need to get into science fiction, is that book that straddles the line. So I think that
Yeah,
those kinds of books being on this list is extremely important. So if
it
there is
is.
anybody watching who's like, I feel like I write
Mhm.
fantasy, but it has sci-fi elements, don't care. Please submit to the list. I'll go ahead and get you on there because all it matters is that it has the sci-fi elements.
Exactly, and that's actually really interesting that you bring up because my co-host and I have had that conversation where it's like that line between science fiction and fantasy is so thin and it crosses over in so many different ways that to gatekeep science fiction as just one thing, it really is detrimental to sci-fi, and it really kind of boxes it in and doesn't allow it to expand and grow. And that's
Yeah,
something that I love that indie authors are able to do, is that they're able to expand in the idea of what um,
yeah,
science fiction is.
and that's
If you were to define science fiction, how would you go about doing that?
so that's the thing that I think is really frustrating as a science fiction author and someone who really loves science fiction. And I'm gonna talk bad about Star Trek and Star Wars for a second. I'm a Star Wars super fan, so I think that gives me the ability to do so. But the thing is that I think Star Wars and Star Trek and Marvel and Hunger
Hmm.
Games and Twilight, like those things have all ruined science fiction because it creates these very like monolithic boxes of what science fiction is. So someone who doesn't know anything about sci-fi might go, well, it's going to be like Star Wars, I don't like that. Oh, it's going to be like Star Trek, I don't like that. Oh, it's going to have vampires like Twilight, I don't really like that.
Exactly.
Those kinds of big boxes are, I think, detrimental. And so I think science fiction really is a lot of stuff. And I think there's a lot of science fiction that people don't necessarily like. I think one of the biggest examples is, for me, The Walking Dead. And all of the Walking Dead shows, a lot of people don't consider that sci-fi. It
It's
is,
totally
yeah,
sci-fi.
it is
Completely
sci-fi. They go,
sci-fi.
oh, that's zombies. They do the same thing with vampires. A lot of times
Hmm.
vampires are kind of sci-fi coded, you
Hmm.
know, and so they'll go, "Oh, well, that's fantasy," and it's like, well, not necessarily, because, I mean, if you think about it, something like Interview with a Vampire, is that science fiction? Is it fantasy? I mean, it
I
could
think it
be.
treads that thin
Yeah,
line
it
that it
treads
could
the
go
it
either
treads the
way.
line. I think a lot of
Hmm.
people would probably get on to me for saying it even treads that line because they'd say, "Oh, well, that's just fantasy," you know. But I think there's a lot to be said
Yeah,
for
yeah.
when you go
Yeah, and I
into.
agree with you with The Walking Dead. It's
Yeah,
absolutely a sci-fi because post-apocalyptic, a virus, that's science,
yeah,
right? That's changing people. And yeah, there are zombies, but there's always that element of fantasy, even within traditional science fiction.
yeah,
There's a tiny bit of
yeah,
fantasy. There's a family. There's a little bit of everything that you could possibly want to read about in
yeah,
science fiction. There's really nothing in science fiction that can't be found.
yeah. And Sarah Andrews just made a comment that I think is a great point. Yeah, the
Yes.
urban fantasies, yeah, have a basis in
Yeah.
sci-fi.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and James agrees. The big players in genre blend out not only the perception but also the integrity of the sci-fi genre and what people incorporate into science fiction. And that's very, very true. It really does have an impact on science fiction. That's why sometimes labeling things may not always be the best way to go about it. Because I would never think of The Walking Dead, for example, as anything other than science fiction.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do. They go, "Ooh, I don't like sci-fi," and it's like, "Do you watch The Walking Dead?" And they're like, "I love that show," and it's like, "Well, that's sci-fi," and they go, "Really?" They don't.
Yeah.
The majority of people don't think about it like that. So I think that's
Mhm.
sci-fi horror.
Yeah, Eric Williamson, one of my
Yeah.
favorite sci-fi horror indie comic book writers. He's been on the Sci-Fi Queens podcast. He says sci-fi and horror. He has to slip that in. But that's another genre you don't always think of as being sci-fi is horror. But there are a lot of sci-fi elements and pure sci-fi in horror that I think people miss.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course.
Yeah.
100%.
And has this project, what do you see it going? Where do you see it going? How do you see it expanding? Because
So
you've got, what, 80 something authors already? And
yeah.
it's going to grow for sure.
Yeah. My plan is, or my thought process is, um, for now it's just hosted on my website because
Mhm.
I had no idea how many authors were going to respond. So I was like, maybe I'll get 20, maybe I'll get 30, not that many. 85 is a lot. And I plan on, for my own author career, going to a lot of cons, starting to
Yeah.
go to a lot of cons because I've noticed that science fiction gets a lot more traction in person than it does online.
Hmm.
And so one of the things I'm going to
Agreed.
do for my list is, or one of the, not my list, the list, excuse me. One of the things I'm going to do for the list is I'm going to have a QR code on my table with a sign that actually goes to the list. And so people who are
Absolutely.
interested in indie sci-fi can go to the list. So I'm going to start trying to get the list out there that way. I'm going to I got my book on a release list by contacting a writer at IO9. So I'm going to reach out to that writer and see if they'd be interested in writing a kind of a piece on the list to get more kind of interest out there for both authors and readers. I'm going to
Yes.
see if I can drive as much traffic to the list as possible. If it grows big enough, I do plan on breaking it out into its own website because that seems
That's
only
excellent.
right. I
It
mean,
seems like a natural course of
yeah,
its length. Absolutely. And guys, the Sci-Fi Queens are going to promote you like crazy. Okay, when we do something, we are exaggerated because that's how we do things here.
yeah,
We've got to on our website. There's a link in our website to this list. It's in my bio. It's rolling on the bottom of the screen. Definitely. Eric
yeah.
Williamson has an interesting comment. You should ask all of the authors to submit to you a short story and then put together a really cool anthology. What do you think about that?
I think ideas
So
like
read
that.
it. I'm there for it.
Yeah, no, I think ideas like that are amazing. Um, what I will say, just to be just to do like a caveat is I would like to be able to spin it off into its own website. I would like to do a lot more with it. When it comes to that, when the list gets big enough and it comes to that, I'm definitely going to try to put together like some kind of committee to where it's not just me, because I don't want the list to be just in my hands. Once it gets big
Exactly.
enough, I want to be able to have, other people be involved as well, because just in case anything happens, just in case like, my website gets taken down, or if I have to step away for a while, I don't want it to be like, well, it's not getting updated because of me. And
Exactly.
also, I am still writing. So right now, the reason I was able to do this is because I'm between projects. And so now that I've put the list together, I'm about to step into my next project. And when I step into my next project, I get pretty busy. So that kind of idea, like an anthology, I think that's great because one of the things I've mentioned is every single author on this list has consented to being on the list, so they know they're here. They're not just, oh, I just pulled a list of authors offline and I stuck them on the list. Every single author knows they're
Exactly.
here. So if we do have a website that includes a forum or something like that, where I can say, hey, we've spun it off into its own website. There is a forum, or if we do a separate Discord, because I know Discord's easier than actually moderating an online forum these days.
Yes.
So if we did like its own website and then probably its own Discord, and then like I can see like an anthology, and then WordPress right now, and I haven't done it yet because I haven't decided how I want to do it, but WordPress gives me the option to put kind of a rotating gallery at the top of the page. So I could have a rotating gallery, and every quarter I just change the 4 or 5 books at the top. We could do a featured book of the quarter. We could do, sci-fi awards and all that other stuff like that once it gets, big enough. And obviously, I can come up with as many ideas as I want, but I don't want to promise anything because coming up with ideas is a lot different than putting them into action. And so I don't want to say I'm going to do all of this stuff and then disappoint everybody. So I'm going to do like baby steps, one step at a time, because anthologies, self-published anthologies, are incredibly difficult to put together. I have a cosmic horror short story that is part of another anthology, but that anthology has kind of been in the works for, I think, 6 or 7 years at this point now. So
Yeah.
it becomes kind of it can become kind of spinning your wheels if you try to do too much all at once. So I'm focusing on the list now. I'm trying to get as many authors onto it as I possibly can. Once we get enough authors on the list, and once we get additional once we get some additional hands on board, like, so James, who's in the chat, James has been very gung-ho about this as well. He's been very excited about the list. He's been very like, hey, I want to help out, which I really appreciate. And I think that if this continues going and growing how it has been, then I'm definitely need help of people like James to kind of committee a lot of the things that we want to do into existence, and
Exactly.
that means having more than one person in charge of updating the website. That means having more than one person being able to make edits and things like that. So it's going to be a big endeavor down the
It's
road. And
building community.
yeah, exactly. And building a community from scratch is really hard. It's very different than just putting out a TikTok video every single day. It's literally, literally building the community from scratch. It's
It's
not just like,
literally,
oh,
yes.
it's not as simple as a follow button. It's, hey, here's all my information. Please put this up on this page and make sure that it's
Exactly.
with everybody else's
Yeah.
info. So
Yeah, and one of the things that people should be aware of, that you also have sci-fi comic book authors on there as
yes,
well.
yeah.
Because yeah, that was something that I
Well,
had asked you about, and your response was epic. I loved it. Because they're books too, because that's how
yeah.
I feel.
Well, I enjoy comic books. I really do. I don't necessarily buy them as much as I could. But I mean, yeah, I'm open to all forms. I mean, it's funny
Yeah,
because the back image that you have here with W.R. Bailey, W.R. Bailey is writing and releasing Nebulous a chapter at a time on his website. So he's published. He's not like, he doesn't have a book published, right? If you want to go like air quotes, and the only reason I'm doing air quotes is because those kinds of stories and that kind of storytelling is just as valid as publishing a
yeah,
paper book or putting out an ebook. And in some
absolutely.
cases, readers will enjoy that more than sitting down for a whole book because it's also more digestible and less intimidating because, oh, I get to read one chapter
Absolutely.
a week, right? So that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's so important because also, it gives people a variety when they go on the website, be like, oh, there are sci-fi, comic books. They may not
Yeah.
even be aware that that's something that, exists. And that's important because it does. And it's there for everyone. And, when I saw your video, it was tagged in your video by Shasara, I immediately knew that this was right up Sci-Fi Queen's alley. I was like, oh yeah, we got to promote this guy. We got to get him. We got to get him on. Uh, here on Sci-Fi Queens, because I want to make sure that everyone knows about this. And I want everyone to be aware, especially in the authors. It's You have to do not just write your own books, you have to do your own publication, you have to get them printed, you have to get them out, you have to make sure your own announcements are out there. All of that is very taxing. It takes a lot of work, and most writers are still have a full-time job, so
Yeah.
this is like a second job that's tagged with three and four other jobs attached to it. So
Yeah.
I think it's so important to help each other out. And as someone who loves to promote and read sci-fi books and sci-fi comic books, it's our pleasure here at Sci-Fi Queens to help out in any way possible. So you are always welcome to reach out to us and say, I need this announced, and we've got your back here. Okay, because I didn't my co-hosts are not here today, but I already spoke to them and they're on board with it. They said, oh, this sounds just like something we do. I said it absolutely is, because I'm excited to see this project grow. And I want to take an opportunity, because we can't here at the Sci-Fi Queens have a actual author and not talk about him and his books. Oh, we're gonna put you on the spot, brother. It is on. So, yeah, your book is on my to be read list. So talk to me about your latest book, your latest sci-fi, the one you want people to kind of check out most. And tell me about you, about your writing, and what inspires you to write.
Yeah, so that's really so. I right before the podcast, I went over and grabbed some books. So I obviously have mine. Mine is called Ico's Dive. It's the only one I have published right now. The sequel is with my publisher. I'm with a small indie press out of the UK. So that's a very interesting dynamic, because everything's on a 6 hour time delay. Um, but yeah, they I wanted to go traditional for the longest time. I was in the query trenches for 10 years. I started writing sci-fi during a hard time. I think a lot of people use writing as kind of a catharsis of some kind, and that's why I started writing. And because I really enjoyed reading sci-fi and fantasy growing up, I grew out of reading fantasy because I think I kind of got bored of it. I like the punchiness and the fast pacedness of sci-fi a whole lot more. So I kept reading sci-fi. I decided to start. I had story ideas, and my brother was always the writer. He was always a much better writer than I was. My brother is one of these writers who, he corresponded with Ursula K. Le Guin before she passed. Like, he wrote her letters, she wrote him letters back. So he has letters from Ursula K. Le Guin.
Wow.
He corresponded with Andre Norton as well. And I don't know if you know any of her books. She wrote the Witch World series. She wrote the original
Yes.
Beastmaster, like way back in the 60s or 50s. She wrote under a male name, Andre Norton, because back then females didn't get published in sci-fi. And so she wrote to Andre Norton, and Andre Norton, before she passed, invited us to come to her library. She had a library in like Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So I got to meet her as well. So I didn't really appreciate the importance of these kinds of things until I started actually writing my own stories, and I was like, oh, that was actually much more important than I thought it was when I was a little kid. And as a sci-fi writer, this is the trilogy. So C.J. Sherry, who is one of my favorite authors for this trilogy, it's called the Fated Sun trilogy, and they're really small. They were written like back in the 70s. I read these so much when I was growing up, because I really liked the trilogy. And the trilogy is it's about this human who becomes friends with, friends is kind of probably the wrong term, but who falls in with the people who are the last of their kind. And
Okay.
they're like intergalactic mercenaries who always hired themselves out to the highest bidder, and basically there's a war between aliens and humans, and the humans are, the story starts with them trying to get a peace treaty, and the story goes from there, and it's all about like politics, and it's about racism, and it's about It's about colonialism, and it's about like getting rid of the indigenous, and it's got like all of these different, or not getting rid of the indigenous, but like the unfortunate kind of destruction of the indigenous over time by other more advanced civilizations. And it's very like as small as the novels are, they're completely packed with a lot of really interesting details. And ever since reading those books, I've always wanted to write science fiction like that. I'm still not there yet. I'm still not that good of a science fiction writer, but that's kind of what pushed me to write sci-fi. And that's kind of, my book. I wrote it because, I wrote a flash fiction story. A lot of people like the flash fiction story, and it was about these characters in the future. And I said, well, I want to write a story about, how they met. And at first, it was just kind of a very rote sci-fi horror story.
Yeah.
It was basically like Alien, where they go onto a ship, and her being
Which
the
I'm
last.
here for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is that the first version of the book was that. It was basically Alien, and her being the last human in the galaxy was kind of a footnote of that story. It was mentioned in a chapter, and I submitted this book to like all kinds of contests and stuff, and one of the readers, because one contest sent it to 5 readers, and a lot of people liked the writing style. But one of the readers was like, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing in your book, because I think her being the last human in the galaxy is a lot more of an impactful thing to explore
Oh,
than
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
like an
agree.
alien, at the bottom of the sea. And so sorry.
Was that hard to hear though, after you have written the book a certain way?
Not really. Sorry, my wife was texting me from downstairs. Uh, no, actually, not really. Because Aiko's Die was my 6th book, and so my first outing as an author was to try and write a trilogy, which I threw away before finishing book 3. So I wrote books 1 and 2. I was halfway through book 3, and I realized that I was not a good enough writer to write a trilogy, because it was my first ever try at writing something.
Exactly.
And then I wrote a murder mystery, which no one will ever get a chance to read ever again, because I actually queried that one and I got a full request. And then revisiting that, I'm like, I can't believe it ever got a full request, and I can't believe I actually sent the full manuscript to someone. And then so I had thrown away 5 books, and I'd done like tens of thousands of words of discovery writing for other books, to see kind of what I wanted the story to be. So for this one, to rewrite it from scratch, because it went from third person to first person as well. So to
Exactly.
rewrite it from third person, where it was basically just horror at the bottom of the sea, to first person, where it's about finding your family, finding your place in the universe, dealing with grief and loss, to make that change was very much worth the rewrite.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
It was very much worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Um, One of the things I like to do, and it's something that it's kind of my rule. I got to read the whole book before I review it. And I won't review a book that I'm not crazy about. If I don't like the book or it's not vibing with me, I set it aside. I move on because I feel that's more harmful than it is anything else. And I'm just a reader. I'm no editor. I'm not a writer. I'm just a reader. And I'm not going to critique something I'm incapable of doing myself. As much as every sci fi nerd would love to be able to write, we all can't. That is a gift that you all have bestowed on the rest of us. And putting this list together makes it easier for us to find that gift.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if I don't like the book, I won't review it because I think that's harmful, especially with indie authors. They're trying to get people to say nice things and say read it so that other people will read it.
Hmm.
So that's like a big deal for me. Like I hear people making these reviews, and I'm like, why are you doing that? don't
And
think I
see,
could. Oh, it gets to me. It gets under my skin. Like it really does bother me when I hear bad reviews. I don't
and see,
like it.
that's for me. That's if so. I feel a little bit differently about that because I thrive on very harsh
Are we gonna
critique
argue? Are we gonna
personally.
fight? Are we gonna
Um,
fight?
so for me, I don't mind getting so. I think there's a difference between very harsh critique. So if I write
Hmm.
something and it is obviously missing something, or if there's something that is because my dad actually gave me pretty harsh critique about the book, that I was like, oh, I didn't expect to get critique like that from you, but it was valid critique in my opinion. And so for me, if someone's just bad mouthing a book because they don't like the genre, or they don't like the author, or they just don't like it, I can understand where that's not a valid review. You shouldn't do that. But if someone's saying, listen, here are some actual issues that I had. Like I've read 500 books, right? Here's some actual issues that I had that I feel like the author could have done better. For me personally, I like that kind of feedback because
Yeah.
I am very reactive to feedback in my kind of writing style. So where I like writing really
But
punchy
I
stuff.
agree with you. There's a big difference between saying, "Oh, this book didn't quite hit the spot for me," the writing,
Hmm.
maybe. But I feel like let other authors, people who are experienced in writing, make those critiques. If
Yeah,
you're just a reader like myself, just read the book. You either like it or you don't.
yeah.
Um, but is what you're about to say harmful?
Yeah. And I
That's
can
the
understand
question.
that point too. I just feel like probably more often than not, as authors, we're going to be like, come on, give it to me because I want to get better, right? And so I think that's, you know, there's a lot of people that say don't look at your bad reviews, and there's just as many, and I think more writers who were like, I want to look at all of my bad reviews. And they do that not because, some people like to do it because they like to cry online
Mhm.
about it, and get
That's
attention.
very true. Very
But
true.
some people do it because they
Mm,
literally want feedback. They want to
yeah,
understand why someone stopped reading the book, you
yeah,
know. So
exactly.
it's
And in that instant, I think that that's good. That's actually not necessarily positive, but it isn't a negative either. Because if it's going
yeah.
to help the author grow and the author, make positive changes, then that's
Yeah.
fantastic. But I don't think that a lot of times that some of the things you hear online is like that's just
Yeah.
cruel. That is just cruel. What are you doing? But that
Yeah.
drives me nuts. It's like you didn't like the book. Let's move on. Read
Yeah.
something you enjoy.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I
And
and I just have a soft spot for indie authors. I do.
I
I
understand. And I
do.
mean, and I have a review that's where someone goes, I was confused. The author didn't, give enough information, and I stopped reading 60% of the way through, and I was like, you know, I appreciate your review because I thank the person for the review. It's like, listen, I appreciate your review, but at the same time, I was like, I don't. There's not really any feedback there that I can take away because it sounds like you read a genre that you don't like,
Exactly.
which also is kind of like, well, then my sci-fi is not as accessible as I'd like it to be. Maybe I have to
Hmm.
write a more speculative type thing, or write like a heavy
Exactly.
romance subplot into something so that it can peel off romance readers. Because I do have a sci-fi romance that I plan on writing that's going to be very like it's going to be sci-fi. It's going to be very like set in space and all this other stuff, but like 90% of the book is going to take place in rooms and on planets to where you don't really see. It's going to be very much like Attack of the Clones, like the middle portion where he's with Padme on like Naboo and all this other stuff, where it's like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Star Wars, but it's the sappy part of Star Wars that everybody
And you
likes to
know, and
forget.
it's like we were talking about. Sci-fi is so diverse with its meaning. You
Yeah,
can't gatekeep it. We like to do here like a special episode for Valentine's Day. You know how hard it is to find a sci-fi romance. and now I have a list that I can
Shouldn't be
go to
anymore.
find one. Exactly.
I
I'm
mean, you
telling
see
you,
one right in
your
the center of your
list is
screen.
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Your list is going to be the Sci-Fi Queens official place to go to find books.
Well, I'm
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 telling
glad to hear
you.
that, and hopefully it's helpful for you guys. I mean, that's the whole point of the list is that it's supposed to
Hmm.
be helpful for anybody who wants to find sci-fi readers.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, just scrolling through the list, my hope too is, I mean, I wrote these cheesy little bios that I hope that you know people don't mind. But for me, kind of one of the more impactful things about this list is when I scroll through, being able to see the covers. Like I personally, I gravitate
Yes.
toward some of the covers on the list where I'm like, oh, I kind of
Mhm.
want to read that. I kind of want to read that. That looks really interesting. There's some book covers on here that are absolutely amazing that I want to pick up just because of the book covers. So
Yes. I'm
that's
the
kind
same
of
way. I
yeah.
have to tell you, your book, Icos, I was like, that cover is fire. I need to read this book. Before I even read, like, what was it about? It's sci-fi. It has a cool cover. Do I need to know anything else about this? Not really. And that's because good cover can be very eye-catching. Very
Yeah,
eye-catching.
100%. And for anybody who wants the covers, I have like 85 covers on my on my computer that I'm more than happy to send around because I have a folder of book covers now, and they're all fantastic book covers. I love
Yeah.
all of them. Some of them stick out much more to me than others.
Hmm.
But I think that's the whole thing is that the ones that stick out to me aren't going to stick out to other people. So
Exactly.
that's the great thing about the list is people can scroll, and if they find one book that they like, I guarantee you that they're going to find another book that they just love the cover, and they'll pick it up because they're like, man, this cover's
Sarah
great.
says she loves a flashy cover. It's true. It is absolutely true. It is. I mean, it's like going to the library. You ever been to the library and they have like these cup books and it's so plain, right?
Hmm.
But then when you read the book is really, really good. And if it had a flashy cover, maybe more people would read it. You
Well,
know?
yeah, traditional, and even though I'm with a small publisher, they still like to do things a little bit more traditional. They like to, well, we want a cover that's going to be a little bit more, commercial and stuff like that. I'm happy with the cover they picked. I think that it could have
Yeah.
been a lot more artistic, but they're going to do things kind of commercially, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. I need to find this link. My wife's asking for the link. She wants to tune into your stream as well.
Aw, she's awesome.
So sorry, give me a second. I'm gonna text her the link so that
Listen,
she can check it
absolutely.
out.
While you do that, I'm gonna put this up, guys. You need to go to his this link here. Go check it out. There's so many amazing books here. Let me tell you, and Sarah can back me up on this. I find it really difficult to find Latino authors in sci-fi. And I have found quite a few in here. So I'm super proud of this list. And we have so many different indie authors on here, so many different categories and genres. He has created such a diverse and open to all indie sci-fi authors, and that is so wonderful. I already have my book picked out for November, which is Hispanic Heritage Month. We will be celebrating, and I have my trilogy set and ready to go. And I love the fact that this community is being built and it's growing, and it's just really coming together. But we need that you guys, repost his TikToks, send this link to other authors that you know in the sci-fi indie author community, and let them know this is something that is free for them to get on so that others can uh, find their books. Now that's something I wanted to ask you about. Is there are a lot of ways this could have gone down, but you chose to do a free you chose to do it for free for authors. Authors do not have to pay you or pay to be on this list. So, talk to me about that. We need to talk
So
about that.
So
I love free.
I
Listen, I'm
love,
Latina. You say
yeah,
free, I'm there.
I love
Okay?
that question, and the reason why I love that question is because, well, one, I would never charge for this anyway. The most I would do if is not to charge, but to like put ads on the site. I pay for my WordPress site so that there doesn't have to be ads, you know, and I don't plan on doing that. But the reason why I wanted it to be free, and the reason why I think it should be free, is because I've always wanted to be a member of the Sci-Fi Writers of America. That's where all of the like the heavy hitters, all of the sci-fi
Hmm.
authors, that's where they all join. Like once you become a published science fiction author, you join the Sci-Fi Writers of America. You know, you pay your dues, all that other stuff. The problem is that you do have to pay a due. You have to pay $100 a year to be a member of the Sci-Fi Writers of America, and there's actually a monetary threshold that your book has to cross in order for you to be eligible to actually sign up. And
Wow.
so, in my opinion, kind of bad mouthing the Sci Fi Writers of America for a second, in my
We
opinion,
okay with that here.
yeah,
Go ahead.
in my opinion, that is a little bit of gatekeeping. Honestly,
Yeah, it is. It
it's
is.
kind of like if you don't sell,
Mhm.
like I think it's $1,000 worth of, and I think it's $1,000 of profit. I don't know if it's $1,000 just sold or if it's $1,000 of profit, but it's $1,000 is their metric, and that is very difficult to meet for a lot of people, especially if you're indie and you don't have like traditional money behind you for marketing and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And so for me, that was another impetus to have it be 100% free, is because there's already an association in America that is where all of the super important sci-fi writers congregate. You know, and all of those are most likely traditional authors. They're, you know, and it also comes down to, you know, all of the writers in the Sci-Fi Writers of America too. Those are the writers that vote on the Hugo Awards and stuff like that. So all the ones that
Yeah.
are a member. So if you're not a member, you can't vote. You know, it's kind of like it's basically a boys' club. And I don't know if you heard about this a few years back. The Sci-Fi Writers of America, or when they were voting on the Hugos. Actually, some stuff has happened twice now. So I can't remember her name. It was, I believe, the first or one of the first black authors to win a Hugo. It was like way back in 2016 or 2018, and there was a bunch of white authors who were trying to kind of edge her out. And so they were getting all of their
Wow.
friends to vote and nominate certain people because they had nominated a specific author that they expected to win the Hugo Award that year, and they were trying to edge her out, and it wound up not happening. And then the same thing happened a few years back for, what was her name? I brought her book upstairs. The woman who wrote Iron Widow. So she wasn't nominated. Like basically, I think the year that she wrote it, the Worldcon, which is where they like I think announce the Hugos or they do the voting for the Hugos. Worldcon was held in like Hong Kong or Shanghai or Beijing in China, and since she had said some things against the Chinese, you know, Communist Party or the Chinese, and I might be getting the specific details wrong, but she has some stuff up on her TikTok where she talks about how, you know, I think her book was removed from the nominations list, and so
Wow.
it's kind of a, you know, for the longest time it was the boys club, obviously,
Yeah.
and for the longest time it was kind of a, you know, if you're in the club you can get voted on, if you're in the club you can nominate authors and all this other stuff. And obviously, it's going to be very difficult for someone who's an indie to be able to make it into, not every indie, obviously, because some people really find their audience and some people do really
Yeah.
well. But there's just as many of us, more of us, that have a very difficult time finding our audience, have a very difficult time getting those reviews and getting the views, and, you know, being in the limelight enough to where they can get out there. And so the whole point of the list is anyone who finds it, anyone who wants to be on it, they can be on it for free. And the hope is that eventually it's more than just a list. It's kind of a living community where indie authors will bring other indie authors into the community, and people will actually come to the list, and people will actually really be able to be like, oh, indie authors are just as good as traditional authors. Look at all of these books as an example. Look at all of these awards that we've given out. Check out these anthologies that have been written by people on the list. So
Exactly.
all of that stuff is free, and if we do everything right, we'll make money just from people engaging with the community. And that's the
Exactly.
idea, right? Is we're not charging people to be on the list. We're not setting it up to where it's a subscription. We're literally setting up to where the audience engages with it, and hopefully, you know, the authors on the list start to make money. And then if we do like a con one day, I mean, and this might be years down the road, but I mean, if we did a indie author sci-fi con, you
Oh,
know,
that would be excellent.
we would make,
Count me in.
yeah, I mean,
I want to go and help.
and it's not about like the Magic Con that just happened where, the money disappears. It's about putting all of that back into the community, right? You start an LLC or you start a nonprofit because it's not about making profit. It's about pouring all of whatever we make
Yes,
back into the community. So you'd start a
absolutely.
nonprofit, you operate as a nonprofit. Anything you would make goes back into the website. Um, it goes into marketing for authors on the list. It goes into any cons that we would have. It goes into publishing anthologies. It goes into, that's the long term goal.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years, right? Because I'm not
But
trying to
it's
rush
good
into
to
anything.
think about those goals because it gives you this perspective of, okay, these are the little baby steps that we need to take to get
Yeah,
there. And I think that that's important. And I think it's important for indie sci fi authors to know that it's not just a list, it's a list that's being planned to grow, to
yeah,
expand, and it's going to develop into something fantastic. I love the fact that when we go to your website, it literally just says indie sci-fi authors. There's no confusion. Is it here? Is it over here? It is straightforward as to what it is. And I love that. I think it's so user friendly to just click on it. And I think it's fantastic. I think you've done a really wonderful job on your own. I think that because you've done this so far by yourself, and hopefully this will bring in traction of people going, I want to help. What can I do? And I think that I- you will always have a place here in Sci-Fi Queens that are going to promote you. Always, our doors will always be
thank you,
open.
thank you.
But you need other authors to
Yeah,
handle that website. I think that that's important and crucial
yeah,
because as authors, you know what to look for and what to do and how to handle that. I think that that's important. And I'm hoping that other authors go, you know what? I got a couple of hours a week that I can donate to help on this end. And, I want them to reach out to you and say, I want to do this, this, and this. And because we all have different skill sets, right?
yeah,
And you
yeah.
never know that just because someo's writing sci fi doesn't mean that they are not web developers or
Yeah, a
they're
sci-fi
not.
web developer
Yeah.
reaching out would be the best. That would be super cool.
Ooh, that would be awesome. You know they're watching. You know they're
Yeah.
watching.
I mean, that kind of thing would be cool. I mean, I think step one is once I get some time. I mean, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, not from updating the list. I'm going to keep updating the list. Anytime someone reaches out to me, I'm going to keep updating it. But I mean, I need to get into my next writing project, so I'm going to spend a little
Of
bit of time
course.
kind of doing my drafting. But I think the next big step will be to start an actual Discord. I know not everybody has Discord, but people who love Discord.
Yes,
so
it's true. It's
so
so true.
if I start a Discord group, everybody who really loves Discord is going to join the Discord group,
Yeah.
and I think that'll be a great first step because
Yeah.
that kind of allows people who want to be moderators to, okay, you can start moderating the Discord. We can start have moderating discussions if people want to do more than that. So I think realistically, that is probably the first big step is starting a Discord. Um, you know what that looks like, I'm not sure yet,
You need
but
to get together with James because he did kind of sort of start a Discord and it's right up that alley.
okay.
So you guys might want to discuss that. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
he can be in charge of the Discord. I just gave him a new job.
Yeah, the bottom line is whoever's in charge of the Discord just starting up a server to begin with, and kind of just being like, hey, there's also a Discord. That allows me to put a link on that site as well as just be like, if you're an indie author, you can join. I mean, obviously, um, you know, I want to keep it for the authors for now,
Of course, absolutely.
because I think that if we do plan on doing a whole bunch of other stuff with the list, having a Discord for just the authors, to so if I want to make an announcement to all the authors on the list. So, for instance, going back to Eric's comment about doing an anthology, if we got to that point, we could make an announcement on the Discord and just say, hey, this is what we want to put together. If anybody wants to be, interested, here, fill out this Google form, and then, we have the Google form, right? Or fill out
Exactly.
this form on the website if there's a website at that point. So, I
Yeah.
think the first logical step is definitely a Discord. So we'll start there and then move forward.
Absolutely. And I am here for the growth of this project. Sci-Fi Queens is backing you up 100%. If you need another episode to announce anything else, please reach out to me. Not a problem. We'll make it happen somehow. My goals are going to kill me. They're just going to kill me. But
No, I
that's
don't. I don't plan on
okay.
bothering you guys too much. I really appreciate you doing this while you guys are on a break. It's obviously super great. Um, if I do wind up coming into anything where, like for instance, if I do a Discord and want to break it off into a website, I might just at least have you say, hey, we just wanted to let you know real quick. I don't want to
Absolutely.
bother you guys and take up all your time, because this your podcast
No,
is
no,
about the
no, no.
authors, right? But I definitely want to keep growing it, and I already appreciate the support you've given thus far. I do feel like a lot of the posting and a lot of the informational stuff that you put on TikTok and Instagram and stuff has very much driven authors to the site. I've definitely gotten people that have reached out to me and said, hey, yeah, I totally want to be involved on Instagram and on TikTok, and I think a lot of those have actually come from you and your tags on a lot of the videos. So that's super
And let
helpful.
me tell you, Sarah, she's the queen of darkness. She said we are totally okay with this. It's something we support. You are stuck with us. If you need us, we're here. If you just need us to announce something, we'll announce it. If we are here to support the science fiction in any way, shape, or form, whether that's in art, writing, music, TV shows, movies, actors. We are here to support science fiction because we love science fiction here. Before we go, is there any last thing you want us to say? Eric is a troublemaker in these comments. I don't know if you
Darkness.
know.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, I'll do a shout out. Because I think this is important since we're talking about supporting indie authors. I'll shout out Adrienne Rennick. She's actually a local author by me. We actually live super close to one another. So
Oh,
we live in the
cool.
same city. Her first book is Riftbringer. She's actually coming out with Rift Wielder, which is her sequel, and I think it's like 8 days at this point. So
Ooh.
it's gonna be a trilogy. I was lucky enough to get an arc for the second book, and so if you love the first book, so if you love kind of cosmic cosmic themes, like a little bit of horror, a little bit of just like cosmic type
Oh
stuff.
yes, I'm
If
down
you
for it.
like
I'm gonna have to put her
super,
in my to reread.
yeah, if you like super slow burn romance, and I'm talking like super slow burn romance, if you like stuff that feels a little bit like Marvel, her books are going to be right up your alley. This trilogy, so I know she's working really really hard to get the word out there. So I figured it would be a crime not to at least shout it out at the end of the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for letting us help you with this. Thank you for coming on,
Well, thank you
for
for having
doing
me.
this. Thank you for doing this. I mean, this is huge for all indie sci-fi authors. Before we go, I just want to remind everyone that we will be officially back on August 1st, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we're going to be talking about the personal impact that science fiction has had in your life. So if you are a indie sci-fi author and you want to send me a video, you can email me and send me a video of the 2 or 3 minutes of the impact that Sci-Fi has had for you, and we're going to play that on that day because we're going to talk about the impact of science fiction in our personal lives. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will be back August 1st. And let's keep this project going. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. You guys have a good night. Thank you. Thanks again so much. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you for watching the Sci-Fi Queens, and be sure to support us on all our social medias and check out our website